Hey, welcome everyone. This is Larry Myers. I'm going to be hosting tonight. We'll start off with the candidate introductions, and we appreciate you joining the Platform Republicans PAC for this special event tonight. We're going to have each of the candidates introduce themselves and make an opening introduction of who they are and why they're running. I'm going to go about 4 minutes each on those to keep to our time frame. After that, we're going to have about 15 minutes of question and answers from the board members from our Platform Republicans PAC. We're the organization that is sponsoring the Meet the Candidates tonight. So our board members will ask a few questions and the candidates will have a chance to answer those. And then we'll open it up for about 40 minutes of question and answer from the delegates and the others who are participating here in the meeting today. And we just want to keep it as civil as possible. We're all Republicans and we share many of the same values, and hopefully no one's here to disrupt or to be disrespectful. That would not be appropriate as part of this forum here tonight. Once we're finished with the question and answer, we'll let each of the candidates do a closing statement. That'll be about 3 minutes each. I'm just going to go in alphabetical order. We'll go with Brad Baker as number 1, second, Tina Cannon, Carson Jorgensen, number 3, Scott Miller, number 4, and that would have Stuart Pay as number 5 on these introductions. I'm going to turn the time over to Brad, and if you go past 4 minutes, I'll give you a little signal that I'm watching you, okay? So,
all right, sounds good.
Welcome, Brad. Thank you.
All right, and just so we're on the same page, I'll be starting my time right now. The first thing I want to do before I get into my speech is I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. The fact that each and every one of you are here shows how impactful the caucus and convention system is in our lives, and how it is such an amazing system that we in Utah need to do everything we can to support and defend. I'd like to thank the Platform Republican PAC for arranging this event to allow all of us candidates for state chair to be able to get in front of you and to get to know you delegates a little bit better as best we can given the circumstance. And finally, I'd like to thank you, all of my opponents. The fact that we are all here again is helping to reinforce the importance of the caucus and convention system just as a whole. Now that I've gotten just the thank yous out of the way, let's get into the body of my speech. I'd like to give you a bit of a metaphor, delegates. Imagine you're planting a garden and everything else is doing pretty good to really good, but your zucchinis aren't quite cutting. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to rip out the entire garden because the zucchinis aren't quite cutting it? Or are you going to spend a little more time there focusing on that and improving that to try and help your garden as a whole? Delegates, the state of Utah is doing amazingly well considering 2020 was 2020. According to a 2021 national review, we have some of the best COVID response in the entire country. In a 2020 Fox News interview published on January 7th, we have some of the best infrastructure in the country. And this is compounded when in a 2021 Fox News article published just yesterday, it states that the state of Utah is running with almost $2 billion in surplus. Now, ladies and gentlemen who are here listening to me speak, the first thing I want to say is I'm sorry. But the second thing I want to say is Utah is in an amazing shape. Utah is doing so many things right that we need to acknowledge that first. And if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But there are these issues, just like the zucchini I said at the beginning of my speech, that we definitely need to be paying attention to. And so I want to first take a second to commend the current party leadership, be it on the state level or in the actual party itself, for steering us through these trying times. We're at a crossroads, ladies and gentlemen, and we have some amazing ability to make real impactful changes here, not just for the state party, but for the state of Utah as a whole. And so if elected, and I will be more than happy to elaborate this further throughout the questioning period, my platform is going to be pretty simple. My platform is going to be focused on party unity by trying to help finding unifying issues and finding those zucchini that we can work. Next, if elected, I would put a special focus on small donor fundraising, which has proven to be extremely effective in the status quo. And finally, I will target young voters to try and help bring the next generation of people to the caucus and convention system. I'm only 22. I'm turning 23 shortly after the convention. But I have a good idea of what young voters are looking for and what we need to do to improve the caucus and convention system. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Thank you very much, Brad. It's very nice to meet you, and we appreciate you running. Next up, we have Tina Cannon.
So I'm Tina Cannon, and I am running for state party chair. I've been involved in the Republican Party for over 20 years. And in those 20 years, I have never taken a paycheck for the time that I've spent. In fact, it's cost me a lot of money. I've been an Elephant Club donor, and I was really surprised last Saturday night for Carson to announce that we used to have an Elephant Club, because I donated just last January. So I thought we still had one. But I've been a donor. I've been a volunteer going door to door. I've been a state delegate. That inspired me to get involved in my county party, where I have served as a party chair, a party secretary, a party vice chair, which meant that I served on the state central committee as well. 2 years ago, I was the credentialing chair or co-chair for the state convention. So I got an up close and personal look at what it means to credential across all 29 counties. And then a year ago, I was a congressional candidate. So I have seen this party from all aspects. And when we talk about unity in the party, we talk about how you balance the grassroots membership, the elected representatives, and the candidate, and how we make a caucus convention system best for all of them. And I have experience in every single one of those roles in my 20 years. So it's a unique perspective that I bring. When we talk about bringing the next generation or expanding our base of the Republican Party, I represent a key demographic that's missing in Utah politics. And I'm not supposed to run as a woman, but I'm not running as a woman. I'm running as the best candidate because of my experience. But as Brad pointed out, and I appreciate his enthusiasm, we're losing key demographics in our party. Educated, college-educated women are leaving the Republican Party, as are the youth. I happen to be the mother of now 3 college students, because my daughter graduated from law school last Thursday, and I'm proud of her. But I know that generation well, and I know how they communicate and don't communicate sometimes. But I also know what speaks to women. And as we expand our base, Brad also makes a great point about the small donor. I'm always amazed when we talk about big donors and the amount of money that they give. But what we learned in the tax referendum is that big things happen with small donations. And if you can really harness an issue that is passionate and powerful for the grassroots, it's amazing the things that you can do. And that is part of our goal here, is that in order to control our messaging and in order to get back on the platform as the key issue for why we unite as a party, we need to be able to control our organization and our membership and not have it controlled by the elected representatives or the big donors. That there is a voice, there is a place for people. And as is behind me in my office, I have the saying from the Gettysburg Address from Abraham Lincoln, that this is a government of, for, and by the people. And in order for it to stay of, for, and by the people, that means you and I. So I want to close with thanking you for being here and being involved in Utah politics, because it does take all of us working together as a team in order to keep Utah red. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina, and we want to welcome you to the race also. We appreciate having all these great candidates with us tonight. Next up is Carson Jorgensen. And Carson, where's your cowboy hat?
My wife said I had to leave it off, right?
Oh, it's great. We welcome you. You're up.
No, thanks. And once again, kind of like Brad said, thanks, Larry, for having us. It's usually the party sponsors something like this, and this year they didn't seem to do it. So I'm glad you stepped in to fill in the gap, because a lot of people haven't been able to meet the candidates. This year has been a little crazy, as Brad said. Things have been a little out of whack, and it was quite the year. And so we haven't got that interaction that we should have with the delegates this year. And so this is a great tool for that. So thanks again for having us, and thanks for taking out of your time. The rest of you who are on here, thank you very much for joining us tonight. My family's been here in Utah for over 150 years. We've been ranching sheep here in the state of Utah for all of that time. I have a keen interest in what happens to the future of Utah. With 4 young daughters and a family and a posterity and a heritage that I really want to continue. I have a keen personal interest in where the party goes and what happens to this party. I don't want to see my heritage disappear, and I don't want to see anybody else's heritage disappear. And to me, this is my why, because I love the state. I love everything that it stands for. And I really love the history, and I want to see the party continue in that path that has got us this far. As far as policy goes, at the state level, counties sometimes get neglected. From rural counties, especially being here from Sanpete County, I understand that sometimes rural counties don't get all the attention that a lot of focus is put on Salt Lake and Utah County. And I see why. Yeah, it is a population center, but there are a lot of low hanging fruit that we're missing out in the counties. And there are a lot of great people who want to get in and serve. And I think we're missing a lot of that. And so as state chair, I would love to give the tools that these counties need to elect good officials. I'm talking city, town councils, talking school boards, county councils, county commissioners, you name it. We need to start giving these counties the tools that they need to get these people elected. That then puts new people into our system. That gets people's involvement. And now we have added to that base of Republicans to draw from. We've strengthened the caucus system. And for me, this is going to be of the utmost importance. You hear often the SB 54 argument. And for me, the caucus and convention system is kind of hopping on one leg right now because of SB 54. As I make candidate calls or delegate calls, I've talked with hundreds and hundreds of delegates at this point. And a main concern among those delegates is SB 54. They say, why am I going to caucus? Why am I going to the convention? Because I'll choose a candidate and that candidate will be met with 3, 4, maybe 5 challengers on the primary ballot. Like, what good does it do? When people are unmotivated to get involved and when they feel like there's no hope left, it's really hard to rally a base. But if you give them something to believe in, if you give them a reason to keep trying, we're going to keep winning. And this for me is of the utmost importance, that we prioritize the delegates in Utah, that we prioritize our constituents, and that the people of Utah have the final say. I'm not talking big money donors. There's nothing worse to me than when I see big money playing a factor in politics. And this is happening in Utah over and over again. And we saw it again today. I don't want to see this anymore. And at the end of the day, what matters most to me is that the people get the final say. I'll give whatever I've got back left to Larry.
All right, Carson, we welcome you to the race too. Thank you for that introduction. And just so everyone knows, we didn't know how many people were going to attend this. You just never know. I guess we could have done RSVPs, but we have 100 participants and we're clear full. So there's a lot of people who are saying they haven't been able to get on. Do we have Scott with us now? I checked earlier and I didn't have Scott when I first started. If Scott is here, we would have Scott go next. Has Scott gotten here yet?
He may actually be trying to get in and not able to get in, so we'll have to call him and see.
Yeah, that's a possibility. We'll check on that. Then that would bring us to Stuart. Stuart, you were on earlier. You are up next, and we welcome you to the race.
Thank you very much, Larry. I appreciate this opportunity. I know how hard it is to put one of these together. I've done a couple in the last few months as chair of the Utah County Party. First of all, let me thank all of you for being here, for taking the time to put questions to us and listen to our answers. I thought I'd start out with a little bit about why I'm running. When someone first approached me about this job a couple months ago, I was more than a little hesitant to run. Wondered, this is a tough job. Could Jay Reese, thank you. This is a tough job. It takes a lot of time. It has a lot of challenges. And the last 2 years, Derek Brown's done a great job of getting our party back on track. In 2020, here in Utah, we had a great election season. We picked up a few seats all over the state. And most importantly, we picked up the 4th Congressional District seat, starting to remove a little of Nancy Pelosi's power and moving back towards taking over the House of Representatives. As I thought about it, I thought this was an opportunity to serve, and I decided I'd take a chance. Partly because as I look around the West, as I look at our neighbors, Colorado, Arizona, and Nevada, I look at 4 traditional Republican strongholds that are now strongly in the hands of Democrats. These are places where we don't control a single Senate seat. In fact, if you look at a 50-50 Senate, you only need one from those 3 states to flip it. Unfortunately, that's not where we are. And as you read newspaper articles, see the occasional TV piece, you hear that Utah may be next in line. You see that our demographics are young and educated. You see that we have a tech economy, 3 things that normally show that we're headed to a blue state. Now, I don't want this to happen, and I decided that's why I needed to get involved. I will tell you that for the last 2 years, I've been the chairman of the Utah County Republican Party. When I took over a couple years ago, one of the first calls I got was from a creditor that we owed $15,000 to, and to say that our first few calls were unpleasant would be an understatement. As I leave office now, we have well more than $20,000 in the bank. Number 2, the 4th Congressional District, which covers about 25% of Utah County, was in the hands of Ben McAdams. One of my promises was we'd do our best to get voters out in Utah County. We turned out 17,000 more Republican votes this year last year than we did 3 years ago in a race that was decided by just a few thousand votes. That's dispositive. Lastly, we weren't getting along. We had a lot of people fighting. We had a lot of people that wouldn't work together. I challenged our delegates and our leaders to be the party of how to win friends and influence people, and not to be the party of Robert's rules. I will tell you, we have not had a parliamentarian at any of our central committee meetings. We figured out how to get along. At our executive committee meetings, we've had difficult issues highlighted by a pandemic, highlighted by 2 special elections. We figured out how to deal with those issues. We've talked them through. We've had people that started out on one side and people that started out on another. And in the end, we've gotten together. These people on the executive committee are smart, opinionated, very successful people who I understood knew more about our party than I did. I listened to them. I helped all of us shape the policy. And today, the Utah County Republican Party is running as a well-oiled machine. Finally, I'll note the caucus convention system. I disagree with Carson about the value of it at this time because of SB 54. 97% of our nominees come through caucus convention. It's vital and it's strong, but it must be strengthened. Right now, the state party has a committee working on strengthening it. If I'm lucky enough to be elected chair, our first thing will be to push through their recommendations. Thank you, Larry. That's all I got.
Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate you participating here tonight. And we are trying to get Scott on. It may have been that he missed getting on before we filled up with 100 participants. So we appreciate everyone's patience, and we'll just keep moving forward. The next phase that we're going to have in this event tonight is to allow the members of the Platform Republicans PAC Board of Directors to ask a few questions. I can see that Mary has her hand up. I assume that's Mary Burkett, who is a member of our board from Washington County. I'll just tell you briefly as we get ready to hear from some of the board members. The Platform Republicans PAC was formed last year in 2020 for the purpose of raising money to help Republican candidates who stand for our Republican platform get elected to the state legislature. And so we feel like we had a successful first year, raised over $20,000 to help out candidates, and a number of our endorsed candidates were elected to the legislature. So we're excited to be moving on to year 2 and getting to know the different candidates that'll be running next year and the legislators that are in the legislature. And we also have a real interest in the leadership of the Republican Party. We haven't done any endorsements in this race or in the other Republican Party leadership races. At this point, we've stayed neutral. We wanted to get to know all of the candidates. And our board members are from across the state. We have board members from Cache County, Weber County, Davis County, Salt Lake County, Utah County, Iron County, and Washington County. So pretty much all the bigger counties have representation on our board of directors, and they're all experienced people who've been really involved in the Republican Party, either as county chairs, as state central committee members, as members of executive committees, either on the state or the county level. And of course, people who've been delegates off and on over the years. And so we appreciate our board members. We're all volunteers. None of us are paid. We do this because we're passionate about our Republican principles and we want to have good government in the state of Utah. So with that brief introduction to our PAC and our board, Mary, you were up, and then we'll go to Mary Burkett from Washington County, and then to Bob McEntee from Weber County. Mary, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This is for Mr. Pay. I was on the State Central Committee when Mr. Pay, you were brought on as the party attorney. I can only speak for myself as a member of the SEC at the time. I felt that your function was to try to find legal ways within the bylaws to make the SEC conform to whatever it was that the chair wanted at that time. And that was, those 2 years in our state party were a nightmare. I think that's the nicest way to put it. Looking back, do you have any regrets about that? What are your feelings at this point about that function that you seem to have? And I think I'm not the only one who saw it that way. I think there are a lot of others, but I'm just curious to know, what are your thoughts on that period of time?
Sure. First of all, Mary, Larry, how long do I have for answers? I'm sorry if I missed that.
Well, you didn't miss it because I didn't say. I think that when we set this up, we told you 2 minutes for answers. Obviously, we want to keep them short so that we can get lots of questions. And if the other candidates want to give a response, I will let the other candidates also respond. But let's keep it under 2 minutes and shorter if possible. As an attorney, if you're like me, I always tell the judge, you know, I need 10 minutes and then I take 20. So we'll try not to do that tonight.
Absolutely. Mary, thanks for your question. First of all, just one thought. I only served in that position for 4 months. Just one note, I know you mentioned 2 years, but I was actually only in it for 4 months. With respect to my function, I advised on how I saw the bylaws, the constitution, or the party bylaws, the party constitution, and then that was actually a small percentage of what I did. Most of what I did dealt with some lease issues that the party was going through, some other legal issues, to include a small part of which was the SB 54, but there was also an ADA claim brought against the party during that time period, as well as another couple claims that didn't get very far. So my objective was not to advise about how to get around the State Central Committee. As the Constitution says, the State Central Committee is the governing and policy-making body of the party. And so that's what it is. That's what I saw it as. And if I was asked for my opinions on various bylaws or various constitutional elements, I gave my advice objectively as I was paid to do. And that was it.
And how much were you paid for that?
$15,000.
For 4 months?
For 4 months.
Okay, let's go to Bob.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. I've got one also directed at Stuart Pay. However, you know, it's going to apply to all the candidates. So if others want to answer and, you know, relatively short, that'd be fine. So I'm hoping that as chair, Stuart, if you attain that, maybe you'd see it different, that, you know, that delegates and people in the SEC, they would love to have both a secret ballot, but also an expectation of privacy, right? Like if they use their phones to vote, that doesn't mean anybody can jump in their phone. We're using in Weber County for our convention, we're using Election Buddy. I did a test with Election Buddy. It does seem to give you both a secret and secure ballot. Even as the admin, you can't tell who voted how, you just see the final results. It seems good. I'm not an expert. But my question would also be, what can we do to protect the privacy, but also have accuracy in the votes? And I'll point out, I don't know the situation, you probably know better than me, but Utah County just had a problem in at least an SEC race where some voting problem changed the race. So what happened there and what can be done? I will comment, that's the question, privacy and security. Lowell Nelson, who's in your county, we did argue for sequentially numbered paper ballots to use that at convention. It was a close vote. It was decided by the judgment of the chair at that time. He decided that it failed, but I think it might prevent some of these problems. So I just want to hear your comment on privacy and accuracy. Thank you.
Sure. Let me start with what happened over the weekend in Utah County. So on the SEC balloting, what we have is we have multiple SEC seats in each Senate district. That's how we allocate them. And the way votes SEC, or excuse me, the way votes RCC counting program worked was it would go, and then after, so if candidate, and Max Sims, if he's on, could fix this for me, but I'm going to do my best to explain it to you. I'm one of those guys that hires smart people or gets smart people to help them instead of trying to be the smartest person in the room. But as I understood it, as if we had a district that had, say, 5 SEC seats and we had 8 people running, once candidate A hits 50%, they're locked out, right? Because they've already made it, so you start over again. Well, what started to happen was there were people that weren't voting for all of the candidates, right? So all of a sudden, when you started the election, let's say there were 100 people voting, you needed 51 votes to get there. However, if all of a sudden only 90 people were voting, there were occasions where somebody only got to 45 because 10 people didn't vote or whatever. Does that make sense? So what happened was the tallies weren't right. We re-released those results a few moments ago, or about an hour or 2 hours ago. Only one race was impacted anyway. And we have most of that information last night, but we wanted them to make sure that everything was right so we could put out a confident total number issue today. So that's what we did there. With respect to knowing who voted and when, both the state party and the Utah County Republican Party used votes last year as well. We did a lot of research into that time and figured out that this was a secure system. Jonathan Johnson here from the state of Utah has invested a lot of money into votes. He will, bear his testimony of his confidence in it. We relied upon him and other experts to make that decision. Also, Amelia Powers Gardner and Josh Daniels are very confident in it. And based upon their conclusion, we were very confident in its security. I would note too that when we decided to go with votes, we had a county EC meeting where the vote actually ended up 12-12. It was the only tie we had. It's not the only tie, but it was one of the only ties we had. And we went back. We got more information from Amelia about why we should use votes. And she explained it in even more detail, and it sufficed our confidence. I agree with you. Election security is absolutely imperative for everyone. And I see I'm talking too long, so I'll let it go at that. Thank you very much.
Stuart. Carson's got his hand up, and I do want the other candidates to know that if they want to answer either of these first 2 questions, we can have them also comment on these questions. And also for those who haven't seen from the chats, we do have candidate Scott Miller was able to get in now. And after we're done with this question, we're going to have Scott do his introduction so we can add him to the mix here. So Carson, did you want to comment on one of these?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that election security really quick. If we want to bridge the divide in the party, if we want to make sure that we heal the divide, and that seems to be a really big consensus among delegates, what are we going to do to heal the divide? If we want to heal the divide, we have to make sure that the vote is always up front, that everything is above board, and we are above transparent with this, because the quickest way to draw rift in the party is let somebody think that somebody else was elected without having the proper vote count.
Thank you. Tina, did you want to make a comment on it?
I would, thank you. I'd just like to remind everyone that I have never been paid for my service to the Republican Party, even on my professional time. Also, one of the things that I feel like is missing in the discussion when we talk about election security is that there are 2 parties that are involved in this. Not only should it be a system that is as private and secure for the voter, but it also needs to be a system that is private, transparent, but reliable for a candidate. Anytime that someone steps up and puts their name on the line to be able to run, it takes a lot of commitment. It takes time, it takes a lot of money in most cases, and it takes a lot away from your family. Out of respect for that, we need a system that is verifiable so that they know that the time and the effort that they've put into a campaign matters and is valued by by the Republican Party and the platform that we put together for elections. Thank you.
Thanks. And let me just ask, I don't see Brad with a hand up, but Brad, if you want to talk at all about the elections question or the other, we'd welcome you to jump in at this point too.
All right. I don't really have much to say just because I feel like all of the other candidates have really summed it up. One of the chief things that can be done to unify the party is to ensure election security. And I think all of the candidates, with the exception of Mr. Miller, obviously, because he hasn't had a chance to really speak on that, I think all of the candidates can agree that healing the divide in the party is one of the most, if not the most important issues that any of us, should we be elected, needs to focus on.
Thank you. Appreciate each of you answering that question. Let's go back then to Scott Miller. Scott, are you, can you open your screen so I can see you? And we'll have you do, I've had each of the other candidates do a approximately 4-minute introduction. And we've had a couple of short questions that we started in on from the PAC board members. We want to welcome Scott and appreciate him also participating. So Scott, you are up now.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? My name is Scott Miller. I am the past chair of Salt Lake County Republican Party. Ran my way up through the ranks over that time period and served in every capacity, separate of treasurer and secretary of our party. Through that tenure, I realized that there was a definite divide in our party against those that were, I'll say, conservative and those who were a little more liberally minded. My sole focus has been the caucus convention system and the support of that. When I came from California 16 years ago, we have a very funny primary system there, which disallowed any sort of involvement of really just about anybody. We voted for who is the best looking on the big square box on the wall. That's the reason I got involved, is because in this system, a normal citizen such as myself or you can have a say, and it is much more difficult for a candidate to pull the wool over your eyes when you're face to face and eye to eye. That's why I got involved. That's the system I tried to save. As the chair of this party, we implemented in Salt Lake County, we implemented business principles, small business, and through that we were offering services to our candidates and things of that nature. It was actually extremely effective. I live in a county that is purple at best and on its way to blue. Through these business principles that we implemented some 3 years ago, the E-Club, which several other counties are using currently, that format, we were able to turn this county from purple to solid red, especially when it came to our county council. So these methods do work. And I believe, you know, when we're all talking about the divide of the party, you have to ask yourself, what is the divide in the party? What does that look like? And in my opinion, the divide that I see is the conservative side of the party divided with the more liberal side of our party. Now, how you bridge that is going to take some definite real effort, and people definitely have to be engaged, as Stuart said, that are a lot smarter than me, to bring that together. I'm not exactly sure how that is done because we fundamentally disagree on many issues. I think that would take a large amount of discussion to accomplish that. But anyway, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you and welcome to the race, Scott. We appreciate you being part of it also. I don't know if you heard either of the questions that were asked. There was a question about the role of the chair in relation to the State Central Committee in general terms. I'm just summarizing it, and one about the role of voting both in the party elections and in general. Do you have any short comments you want to add on either of those questions?
Sure, I can be brief on both of those. The role of the party chair, whether you're serving as a county party or a state party, is to enact the will of the State Central Committee. That is it. Nothing more than that. My personal opinions do not matter. My personal agendas do not matter. The only thing that matters is the will of the people. So if the State Central Committee enacts a bylaw or an act requires me to conduct business as they deem fit, then that's what I'm required to do. There is no deviation in that. So that's how I feel about the role of the party chair in relation to the State Central Committee. They are the governing body. And your second question was?
The question was about the comments about elections, about electronic voting or versus other types of voting.
Okay. We as well in Salt Lake County used votes in 2018. There were some issues. They weren't security related. They were more change related. There were some difficulties, but we were able to get through it. My personal opinion, I think electronic voting is much more efficient, but I do think that there should be some sort of hybrid system where one can confirm their vote easily. So if that is available to the voter where they can verify that they voted yes or no on a particular subject matter, then I would be much more comfortable with electronic voting. You always have to ask yourself in the electronic industry, is the effort worth the result? And for someone to break into a county convention or something like that to try to change a result, is someone willing to put forth that effort to change a result? And based on that answer, you would definitely need to think about your security in that regard. I would much rather see personally some sort of paper trail. Using electronic voting is fine, but have a paper trail where the voter themselves can verify how they voted and it was recorded accurate.
Very good. Thank you for sharing on those two questions. So I don't see any more PAC board members with a hand up. I'm going to do two things. If any of the candidates want to read through the questions that have been posted in the chat, there's probably 3, 4, 5 different 6 questions that have been posted in the chat by different participants here. You may want at some point when you have time on the program to comment or answer those. But I'm also going to ask a quick question myself. I was going to stay somewhat neutral, but we do have a question that I think is important, and it's not really a loaded question. It's more just what's your style. One of the things that the chair does have authority to do under our bylaws and our Constitution is to make certain appointments. I want to ask each of you, maybe just in 1 minute, what's your style, what's your approach to making appointments within the party? And particularly for those who aren't aware, the parliamentarian helps keep this, particularly the State Central Committee, but also the conventions on track and make sure that we're following the rules properly. And so it's an important position. If each of you could answer that, I'm going to step down in the order that I started with. I'll go Tina, Carson, Scott, Stewart, and then Brad for this question. If you could just keep it short and answer that question. Thank you.
Thanks. So that's a great question. My leadership style is a little bit more like Abraham Lincoln and the team of rivals, that I think that good policy is made when there are diverse opinions. That I am struggling with who I would appoint as the parliamentarian because I can't think of one that I don't get along with or like. So maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know. But so I can't give a name because we have a lot of really great parliamentarians across the board. And I think I get along with all of them unless they tell me differently. So.
Thank you, Carson.
When it comes to my style of legislation and when it comes to my style of appointing people to do things, I've always thought of it as a team. You have people that are complementing each other. And sometimes when you play basketball, you've got a tall guy and a short guy and everything in between. And that's what it has to be. You don't always have to be the smartest person in the room, like Stuart said. Sometimes it pays to know who the smartest person in the room is. And for me, that is the bigger point. I'm a little bit younger, but I draw on the experience of people who have been in these positions before. And I'm humble enough to listen. And that's what you don't often get with a lot of politicians. And that's what we need to have going forward. The other thing is when it comes to parliamentarian, like Tina said, there are a lot of good ones. And honest, I don't know a lot of them. But I do know a few good ones, and I would lean to the more conservative side, those who are willing to uphold the bylaws and the Constitution of the party.
Thank you. Up next will be Scott.
As far as the parliamentarians concerned, Jessica Christopher, I think she's very fair and effective, and she understands our bylaws directly. As far as my management style is concerned, I like to be with people who disagree with me. I do not want yes men or women around me. I would rather a robust debate on approach. And as a result of that management style, then that's why I believe we were effective in Salt Lake County.
Thank you, Stuart.
I'll start with the parliamentarian. I'm in the same boat as everyone else. I really don't know any. In fact, in Utah County, we've tried our best not to use them. I realize that's probably not possible at the state level. I would say the woman that has done it at the SEC meetings the last year and a half or 2 years has done a good job. I'd probably start there. With respect to the people I would appoint, I look for excellence, experience, and a variety. I have learned as the chair in Utah County to listen to everybody, let them debate, let's hear their ideas, then let's make a decision together. Excellence and experience leads to great outcomes, and hearing everybody who has that leads to even better outcomes.
And Brad.
All right, my management style is typically, my leadership style, I should say, is pretty hands-off for the most part. I firmly believe that as delegates, we are smart enough and we are capable enough to make our own decisions. That being said, I would make sure to surround myself with people from all sides of the conservative spectrum, not only to create a healthy political discourse, which is something that this party desperately needs, but also to try and help get the best ideas out there. I'm in a very similar boat for parliamentarian. It's not that I don't know very many. I don't know any to begin with. Before I'd be able to comment on such a thing, I'd like to get more acquainted with parliamentarians to see who would be able to help run meetings in the best manner possible.
Thank you for each commenting. Scott, did you have a follow-up?
I did, thank you. There was a question in the chat, was where do I place myself on the conservative scale? I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most conservative, I would land myself at a 9.
Thanks. And do any of the other candidates want to answer anything that's in the chat? If you do, raise your hand or just unmute and jump in real quick. Maybe keep it to 1 minute or so. Well, you guys are looking at that. Tina, go ahead.
Question of how I would rank myself is you can go back and check me on this. It's in my Facebook post before I decided to run. I rank myself as a platform Republican. In the years that I've been involved, I've had many an opportunity to get offended and to leave. And what keeps me here is where else would I go? I believe in the platform. It is what's kept me here. It is a strong document, and there is one word in there that I would take out, and that's the word abhorrent. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. So Larry, and you may address this later, and if you don't want me to talk about it now, I won't. But the question from Jim and Debbie says, to candidates, will you support a fix to SB 54 to reestablish the caucus and convention system as the only means for a candidate to represent the party in the election? Do you want me to go on with it, or should we wait for later?
Go ahead and answer that. And if the other candidates want to talk about SB 54, I think it's an important discussion.
Okay, absolutely. So SB 54 is a must. And like I've said before, and whether Stuart agrees or not, I'm not sure. But as I talk to these candidates, it is important to them. And to me, their mindset going forward in the party is what's important to me. Because if we don't have people that are enthusiastic who think, what's the use? It doesn't matter what the election percentage is. As we drop our people that are participating in the caucus and convention system, we lose our power. The next thing I want to talk about, and maybe I'll ask this to the rest of the candidates, do you have enough faith in the caucus and convention system to put yourself in front of them, to not gather signatures in your own races? Is that something that you trust your neighbors and your friends enough to do?
Brad, go ahead.
All right, I would definitely support something to try and amend SB 54 to try and help restore the caucus and convention system. I will say I'm a little hesitant to put a focus on SB 54 simply due to the fact that if we look at the legal track record from attempting to challenge it, it's not exactly in the party's favor. We need to, at the very least, be putting an emphasis on strengthening the caucus and convention system, in addition to fighting SB 54 if we so choose. In response to Carson's question, I definitely cannot gather signatures to put myself on any ballot because I don't have the money because I'm a college student.
We'll go with Stuart, and I think Scott also wanted to comment.
Oh, good. Yeah, first of all, I think Carson must have misheard me. If 97% of our nominees are coming through the caucus convention system, it's vital today. And one of the things we were preparing for a year plus ago in Utah County was we actually had several different iterations of caucus going on, or we planned for it. Some were using different types of technology. Others were using different voting methods. And our plan was to run, to quote the Federalist Papers, was to run, laboratories of the caucus, if you will, figure out what worked best, what our delegates like most, and what would keep them coming back. it's imperative that the caucus system continues on, that it grows stronger. If we want to get rid of the signature path, the way to do that is to build the confidence level of the legislators such that they'll remove it. It's not going in there and fighting with them. It's not additional lawsuits. It's building a level of confidence that they will overturn it. And that's through a better, more efficient, more inviting caucus. Thank you, Larry.
Scott, and then Tina and Chad Saunders, just so you know, you've been waiting patiently to ask a question. I'm going to wrap up this SB 54 commentary, and then we are going to go to Chad's question next.
Unfortunately, our legislator has no desire to overturn SB 54, even though I believe they should. My feeling on that is tell the employer on how we will conduct our interview process. And to me, it's along the Constitution of the right to free association, in my opinion. SB 54 is going to be here for quite a long time. I agree with Stuart that the only way is to make our caucus convention system and that nomination process and the support that the party gives our nominee so compelling that we win elections when you come through our systems, as we proved in Salt Lake County, that it really becomes the best shot at becoming elected. So then we become a desirable method. That's really the only combat that we have to, quote unquote, to overturn SB 54 for the foreseeable future. Throwing money at this on lawyers is not going to work.
Tina.
I agree with Scott on that you have to actually look at the history of what's gone on. And I am, again, the only candidate with experience with the Frankenstein that has been created. And when the quote is given of 97%, I think that doesn't take into consideration the statewide races and the federal elections that are going that way, because it was not 97% in those races. And that is where the real money comes into the conversation when you're using a signature gathering route. We would not have had the candidates that we have had, like Neil Love, like Jason Chaffetz, Rob Bishop, even Gary Herbert would not have come through a system that was just signature gathering when they originally went through. So having experienced it, I can tell you where the pros and cons were, as I've been a staunch caucus convention supporter, and my pushback to everyone who asked me not to was, you have to look at this as a strategy. When you raise $150,000 of friends, family, and clients' money to run, it becomes a very real strategy for how do you win. And when you're up against a signature gathering candidate who uses signature gathering the way it is intended to be used, that's a name recognition thing that you have to consider. But what I want to leave you all with on this conversation are these are the issues that you need to understand in order to create a system that a candidate prefers to go through, because there isn't any kind of money that a signature gathering candidate can offset that will offset the power of grassroots conservatives who are willing to go out and work for you. There's just not enough money to overcome that advantage. And when caucus convention becomes that path where you have engaged voters and they are passionate about you and your message, and they are willing to share that for you, that's the better path for you.
So I think I've had all 5 of the candidates comment about SB 54 related issues, but I still see at least 3 of you with hands up. Were your hands still up on that, or were you wanting to talk on something else? Carson and Brad?
Yep, I've got something to add there, Larry. I agree with Scott on that one, that there has to be some sort of compromise. But the fact is, if there's no real reason for them to only do the caucus and convention system, if there's a way for them to do both inside of the caucus and convention system, what's stopping them from doing both? You know, do they not have enough faith in their people? And that, for me, is what it boils down to. Do these people have the faith that they are the good enough candidate and that they have the skills necessary to reach out to their friends and neighbors and to the people of Utah and be accountable to those people to get by?
And Brad, did you want to follow up?
Yes, I first want to apologize to Mr. Saunders for us having you to continue to wait. I would like to pose a question to my fellow candidates, be it answered now or finally giving Mr. Saunders a chance to speak, and we can talk about this later. What kind of plans do my fellow candidates have as far as improving the caucus and convention system? I'd be happy to elaborate on my plan should anyone want to know.
let's do this. I like it. It's a bold move by a candidate to ask the other candidates questions. Let's hold that. I think
I'm
it's a
fine.
great
Let
question.
him go
'cause-
ahead. Mr. Myers, let him go
Yes.
ahead and answer. I can wait on my question. It's okay. Let him go
Okay,
ahead and answer.
okay. I just know that you've been waiting patiently and I don't.
Hey,
want
my
to
baseball
forget-
game's already my baseball game's already started. So I'm sunk as it is. So let's just hear what they have to say.
Hope you TiVoed it, huh? All right, let's do that real quick. If each of you want to share what your plans are for improving the caucus and convention system, then we'll come back to the. Sorry, I muted myself. We'll come back to Chad's question. So, Brad, since you asked the question, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to go to Carson, Scott, Stewart, and Tina. Okay.
All right. So my plan for improving the caucus and convention system is pretty simple. The first thing I would do is have an increase of technology usage by allowing an increase in technology usage, not to replace in-person vetting, but to allow for more information and to allow to accommodate schedules of people who might not be able to participate in the electoral process otherwise. This also will help drastically decrease the cost of running for people like me who are self-funding our campaigns and making our campaign fund managers cry every day. By allowing easier access and allowing ways to be able to spend less money. The next thing I would do is make sure to target young voters, both who are unaffiliated, but also people who might be of the opposing party, to try and show them why the caucus and convention system is so good and why it needs to be worked on. And the final thing I would do, if elected, would be moving on from SB 54. The candidates all seem to be in consensus that this is really bad, but at the same time, with the legal track record that we've been having trying to fight this, it's pretty apparent that the only route for such a hot button issue is to work on continuing to improve the caucus and convention system. And that can be done best by implementing technology and lowering the burden of entry to allow more candidates who might not be able to otherwise.
All right, let's go to Carson, Scott, Stewart, and Tina.
You bet. So, Brad, you have a bright future, my friend. Thank you for all of your good ideas. And I agree with you. When it comes to technology, if we're going to engage the youth, we have to have a technological aspect to what we're going to do. And that's just the reality of it. And as we engage them through technology, that'll draw them into the party to where we can get them into the system. And that to me is very important. The next thing is we have a system in place. We have chairs, county chairs, and it goes on down to the precincts. It is a perfect system for communication. And as we engage in communication, engage our precincts not only once a year, but throughout the whole year to work on issues that are close to them, it keeps them engaged and keeps people active in the convention system so that when the time comes around, people want to be involved. They know what's going on. They're informed, and an informed voter is always a good voter. And there are some fights worth having, Brad. And I think with SB 54, it's a fight worth having because this SB 54 was the last check against basically the establishment. It really said, you know what? You have to listen to the people. If you want this to work, you are accountable to these people. And that's something I so strongly believe in, that we have to work on this. And that's where I'm at.
Scott.
Okay, well, it's actually, I've already been implementing this in Salt Lake County while I was the chair. Technology is key. So what I did was I worked with a very good friend of mine who is a software engineer, and we created a product called VETI. Any delegate in Salt Lake County or precinct chair knows what VETI is. What it is, it's a piece of technology where every precinct chair can log on and actually manage their own information in their precinct. I'm a firm believer in many hands make light work. So what we did here in Salt Lake County is we spread the workload out to our precinct chairs, also giving them something to do, because that has been a constant complaint that we've had with our precinct chairs for really decades, is that once they get brought on as a precinct chair, they don't have anything to do. So technology solved that. The second thing we do, and then we bring a single system to every county. So it's instant communications with data gathering to the state. That has been one of the largest banes of the state party is the amount of time that it takes for the caucus information to get to the state so we can get it to our candidates so they can start biting for their vote. So by having a single system such as I just described, perhaps not that one, it would facilitate that. And along with that system is there's another portion of it where when you go to caucus convention, my 20-year-old daughter told me once that if it's not on this, Dad, you're not going to get the young folks involved, plain and simple. They do everything on this device. They get their news from this device, their social lives are on this device. So we have to implement this. And that's another thing that we have to do with our technology, as the software I created did, was that at caucuses, you can use your phone device to gather that information of who was elected to what, and it's instantly transmitted not only to the county, but the county can then decide to immediately transfer it to the state. So you have instant results after your caucuses rather than waiting a week, in some cases 3 weeks, before you actually get the information. That is, in my opinion, the best way to improve the caucus convention system is by making it efficient and effective in the data gathering. Because what do we really have as a party? What is the biggest asset we have as a party? It is our data, the email addresses, the phone numbers, and the contact information. So that would be what step one would be, is to get everybody on the same page, all using a piece of software that that is very effective and efficient in data gathering.
Stuart and Tina.
All right, thank you, Larry. Great question, Brad. So a couple things. Number one, I think we have to be able to promise delegates that caucus is going to be over in 90 minutes. If we don't do that, I just don't think people are going to come. You know, you look at Americans, their ability to pay attention decreases by the day. I think technology is a big part of that. Nominations can largely be done before they get there. We've already started that a little bit. We need to continue that. Voting needs to be done electronically. We can't have people waiting around for an hour and a half to 2 hours to vote. They're going to leave. They're going to lose. They're not going to pay. They're going to lose their attention span. Number three, I agree with Scott. We've got to get a system, and in Utah County, we've started meeting about this. And I actually had a demo done the other day for me by a contractor who has a system set up so that the precinct chair can go in and change the precinct or the delegates and do the precinct chair has the power to take care of their precinct as time goes on, and it continues through that. So it's a true CRM as opposed to what we have now with spreadsheets and the bane of communication through spreadsheets. Finally, we have to make sure our delegates show up at convention and that we're not replacing delegates. I think the biggest question I get from those who question the caucus system is, listen, my precinct chair appointed all three of our delegates because none of them would go to state convention. And if that's the case, we have a problem, because then we have a confidence problem in our voters saying those aren't really the people I elected at caucus night. We have to figure out how to get those people there, or how to allow them to vote remotely if that's the requirement. You and I, Larry, have been doing hearings, I'm sure, for 1.5 years now with judges who never thought they would ever allow somebody to appear remotely in a hearing that mattered. Well, that's just not the case in our society. People, especially young people, they live on their phones, they live on their tablets, they live on their computers. We've got to include that in our voting and our conventions, or we're just not going to advance. We're not going to recruit those people. Thank you.
And Tina.
Thanks. One of the things that we get beat on every single time is the messaging. And when Count My Vote started, which was the precursor to SB 54, we allowed them to take that narrative that we were keeping people from having a voice in their government. When really what we were doing is, probably every single person in this meeting or who is part of the platform Republicans has been the person in your neighborhood where people call you and ask you, hey, what is this on this ballot? What do you think about these candidates? What are my choices here? Who are you leaning towards? Because let's just face it, we are all the geeks, the political geeks in our neighborhoods. And that's really what caucus convention was. This exists whether or not we call it caucus convention. There is that person in your neighborhood that you trust, that is following politics, that is getting the information and vetting all of the candidates. We're just making that a formal process. So that's the first thing, is we have to own the messaging and take this back for what exactly a caucus is and why we do this and why it is better for the residents of Utah. The second thing that we never talk about is the money. That when Mia Love ran the first time and she went to DC to raise money for her race, they asked her how much money she needed, and she said $125,000. And they laughed, because in Washington, DC, the answer is usually how many million you need. Caucus convention makes it possible for candidates without a lot of self-funding or independently wealthy to actually be a candidate that is not beholden to the big donor by the time they get to Washington. That is an important part of this process, and it is what speaks to the regular, ordinary people in Utah, because they don't want a system that is for the powerful and by the powerful instead of by the people. But I am going to say there are some weaknesses in the system. Probably everyone on here has been a state delegate and an active state delegate that has actually vetted a candidate and been part of that process. So it's shocking when you're actually a candidate and you get people who will hang up on you, who don't give you a good address, who tell you if you call one more time, they won't vote for you anyway. That there needs to be a better understanding of exactly what is involved in being a state delegate and how much time and how many emails and how many phone calls, that it is a real service to your neighbors. And then finally, I would say there is a piece of this that we're missing in the reporting back and going back to our communities and our neighborhoods and telling them how you voted and why you voted. In the 6 years I represented my neighbors, never once did I take a private vote, because they needed to know and deserve to know how I voted. And that part of that process is going back and explaining to people, this is what I found. This is why I like this candidate. These are their platform issues. I have seen state delegates who will do it in a spreadsheet. Since I'm married to an engineer, this speaks to me still. But this is a great system. What we need to come across with is this isn't a problem. This is a great, better system. And anyone who has experienced it knows this is the better system. But you have to be able to explain to them why and how it's better.
Thank you to each of the candidates for addressing that question. Definitely an important one. So let's go to Chad. He has been waiting patiently. He's missing his game tonight. You mentioned the sacrifices we make to be part of this system, and that's definitely one of them.
Well, what's funny about the game I'm missing, it makes me feel like a good Utah Republican, because I'm a Mariners fan and a Houston Astros fan, and they're playing each other tonight. So if that is not a metaphor for what we're doing here this evening with all this divided politics we're talking about, I don't think there's anything else that is. So I kind of get some humor in that. My question is a little long, and I apologize, because you asked us not to have long questions, Mr. Myers, and I apologize, but I feel my question deserves an explanation. We are seeing a lot of our national politicians from here in Utah doing when I was a kid, I worked at a restaurant, and there was a kid I worked with who was a busboy who always made sure that the boss saw him sweeping when the boss walked by, looking busy and looking like he knew what was, that he was busy. When the boss was away, that broom was down and he was snapping towels at the waitress. I think we have some of that going on with our politicians in our state. So this question is a little bit off the beaten path. I want to know what you all did today. What was your day? And I don't want cookie cutter preconceived actions or messages that you've sent me on your emails. I don't want, and I'm looking at certain candidates, I don't want your cookie cutter pre-cut answer. What did you do today? What was your day like? And then what you did today, are you going to transfer that to what you will do for us as the commissioner of our party? Because actions, real tangible actions, speak louder than words. So I want to know what your actions were today and what you did and how that will help you lead our party and make our party successful. Thank you.
Let me go in this order. I'm kind of jumping down one each time through the list. So I'm going to go with Carson, Scott, Stuart, Brad, and Tina. Carson, and let's try to go 1 minute because time is clicking away, and I do want to have a little bit of time for closing statements after questions. So thanks, Chad. Tell us about your days and how that's going to impact you as a leader.
Chad, Chad, that's a phenomenal question because I live in the same world. I don't tell me what I want to hear, show me what you do. I mean, this morning I started off early checking sheep. My family, we run sheep here. After I was done with that, I hauled water to the sheep while I made delegate calls. After I was finished doing that, we went back to the lambing shed, and in between delegate calls, we fed the sheep. After that, I went to my small business and I worked all afternoon in my small business while doing an interview with the Deseret News and speaking to 4 more delegates while I was working in my shop. This is the kind of work ethic that I feel is missing in the world today. And I appreciate your question so much because this is my life. We work and we do. And my grandpa told me one time, he says, you want a job done? He says, find the busiest people out there and they'll have it done.
Scott.
Well, today I woke up, happened to be my day off, but normally I would go to work. I'm a mechanic, I'm a blue collar worker. But today I spent some time on my property investments. I also do some investments on stocks. So I teed up on that a little bit today. Did 2 interviews today for the delegate information. Spent quite a bit of time with my wife and my daughter, who recently moved back in at 25. So I have a house full. My father fell just a couple of days ago. He lives with us as well. So we spent a lot of time making sure that his needs were taken care of. And then here we are now. So for a day off, I usually try to stay pretty busy. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to my garage today. That's my place I love to be. So as far as it relates to what I do as the chair of the party, the one reason my wife is cautious for me doing this is she knows that when I go in to do anything, I go 100%. I do that in my personal life and I do that in my professional life. And I think that's why I've had a modicum of success being a blue collar worker. So there you have it. That's what Scott Miller's day looks like.
Stuart.
So today was an odd one. Our oldest daughter has been serving a mission in Honolulu, Hawaii, had to come home because of some medical issues. So my day started out picking her up at the airport. I got home, I jumped on a phone call with a client that went for 2 hours where we tried to resolve a contractual dispute that looks like it's not going to get resolved. When I got done with that, I read 2 briefs that we filed with the court today. That took about 4 more hours. I did 1 more call with a client. That gets to about 9 hours worked, which is probably about average for me. I then responded to several delegate emails. I read through a couple things to prepare for this. If your question, Chad, is how hard will I work and how hard do I work, I'll put my work ethic up against anybody on this earth. And when I, like Ronald Reagan says, when I make my decision up, I exact my will. And that's why I want to do this, is because I think the things the Republican Party need are people to work hard, exact their will, and do what's best. And I'll do that. Thanks, Larry.
And Brad?
All right, so my day is a little bit weird too. I'm actually in North Carolina right now, helping out a family member who's recovering from surgery. Around the edges of that, I've been working through a pretty good sized questionnaire that I was sent by Summit County. It's pretty informative, and it's just a lot to get through. The other thing that I really made sure to emphasize before I jumped on this call was making sure to do research about various issues. I know for a fact that I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm also probably the least experienced person in the room. And it's really of the utmost importance when making decisions, be it in my life or as a chair, should I get elected, just the fact that I need to be willing to hear all the sides of an issue, and I need to be willing to do the research to be able to make an informed decision, especially since, like I said, I'm probably the least experienced person in the room.
And Tina.
My day is I'm finishing up quarterlies for clients this week. So I have had the day of telling people that their unemployment insurance has doubled from what it was last year based on what's happening with our economy. When we give employees unemployment, that has an impact to employers. And then we have long conversations about how hard it is to actually hire people these days who are making more money while they are receiving unemployment instead of working in their starter positions in most of these companies. So, and then my son, my youngest son, who is on the autism spectrum, had his first day at work today. And I am incredibly proud of that son. And then my daughter, who is studying for the bar, brought a puppy home during this week. So I might have yelled at the puppy, although it is darling most of the time. And then I got to spend some time answering phone calls and emails and trying to do my calls back out to people. So I have been juggling all of it. Then the power went out and it has been a day of, I was just grateful that it came on again 15 minutes before we started this, so I would have internet. But this is rural Utah, and that's what we deal with on occasion.
Great question. Gave us a chance to look inside each of you and see what you do with your days. Thank you.
Oh, Larry, I forgot the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was going to have an easier spring. I wasn't planning on running for this. I actually went back to school. So when my husband came home, I got to lord it over him that I actually got a perfect score on my physics final exam. You're welcome. Pretty proud of that one today because I'm an accountant and he's a rocket scientist. So that was really important for me. And I'm glad I got to brag about that here too.
With all the discussion about the smartest person in the room, Tina, you
That was me today.
qualified with
I'll take it.
The physics.
Only today.
Congratulations. So Lane Beck is also one of our board members from Cache County. He's been waiting patiently with his hand up. And here's what I'm thinking. I'm looking at the clock. I've got a 6:51 and our goal was to try to wrap up around 7. I know Carson needs to go because he had a previous commitment. I'm thinking let's do one more round of question here, maybe a minute each. And then if Carson wants to, he could do his closing statement and be excused. And then if any of the other candidates need to be excused, we can do them too. And then those who want to stay, I think we could take a few more questions. So do any of the other candidates need to be done by 7?
I need to be done probably by about 7:30, 7:45.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to go that long, but as long as we could go a little past 7, we can make sure we get all the questions in. So Lane, let's do your question and try to go about a minute each on the answers. And this time we'll start with Scott on the answers and go down my list.
The question I had, Larry, was specific to Stuart Pay. I don't know if the others will want to answer this question because it has to do with a time period that I was serving on the State Central Committee. And that is back in 2017 when Mr. Anderson was first elected. There was a meeting held in North Salt Lake City where there was an effort on the part of, for whatever the reasons, the party leadership at that time to record all of the text messages and, or at least have access to it from one of the members of the party that had offered his services to the party leadership. And then a few months, well, subsequent to that, several members of the State Central Committee had trouble with their phones and their electronic devices that they were accessing the internet through. And the party leadership at the time asked everyone to log into the Wi-Fi system on North Salt Lake City. And after they had done that, it was kind of an interesting experience. But in the next meeting we held in November, Mr. Pay was hired by the then party chair, Rob Anderson, to be the party counsel. And he was asked in the meeting if there was any expectation of privacy for the members of the State Central Committee. In other words, the party leadership snooping on all their text messages and emails and whatever was going on with their electronic devices. His answer was a little bit lacking in my view. But I would just like to ask Mr. Pay if he believes there is an expectation of privacy on the part of State Central Committee members or delegates if they're logging onto an electronic system to vote or do anything of that nature, if the party is offering that and encouraging its members to log on to the system.
So just to be clear, Lane, I was not at this North Salt Lake meeting. But I remember the question in Park City is where I believe that next meeting was. And my response would be fairly straightforward. If you log on, and taking out, let me just say, I would not encourage people. Let me back up. If you log on to someone else's system, then I don't think you have an expectation of privacy with respect to that other system. I don't see how you could. Now, with that said, I personally would never advise someone to look at someone else's text messages or anything like that. And like I said, I wasn't involved in that North Salt Lake meeting. But if I log on to a school's, for instance, a school's Wi-Fi, or if I log on to my neighbor's Wi-Fi, certainly he's going to have access, the school's going to have access to what I'm sending. So I don't know how, if you're using a third party's system, I don't know how you're going to have an expectation of privacy there. I believe that was my answer that day. I mean, it's been a few years, but that's how I recall.
Okay, well, thanks for the answer. It's my understanding, and of course, you know, there was a lot of angst going on in the party then, and I appreciate your your candor there, Stuart. But I was one whose cell phone had some issues, and I had to replace my cell phone at the time that happened. And anyway, thank you. I guess so. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, don't log on to someone's Wi-Fi if you have any expectation of privacy.
I think that would be legal advice that I would give people.
And if any of the other candidates do want to comment on that, I know the question was directed at Stuart about a specific thing. I don't know that hopefully it'll never be a problem in the future. But if anyone wants to make a short response to that, I do want to give Carson a chance to do his closing statement before 7 o'clock.
I have a quick 2 cents to put in on that one. I was present for that meeting as well. And I'm going to disagree with a little bit with Stuart on this, is because that Wi-Fi system was supplied by the party for our use, if my understanding is correct. And I think if the party itself is supplying a tool for us to use to vote or whatever the purpose is, I believe that there should be a modicum of privacy, just because the party is the one that has contracted out that service. So that's my opinion.
Hey, Larry, let me respond to that. My point is not what the party should or shouldn't have done. My point is, legally, do you have an expectation of privacy? And that was the question that was aimed at me that day. I mean, I personally wouldn't read anyone else's text messages anytime, but that's just me.
Let me go to Carson for a closing statement because I want to respect his opportunity for his other meeting. Carson, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here, Larry. No,
if
like
you
I say,
want to take 3 minutes and wrap up, we appreciate you being with us. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. When you guys come out and said, well, what days are good? And I said, any day but Monday. This has been going for about 3 months. But anyways, I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for accommodating me. I know it was a little bit much to put it this early in the day, but thanks to everyone who put this on. Once again, I think we've all been pretty straightforward, and I think we have all made our points pretty clear. And there are a lot of good ideas out there. At the end of the day, it's the people's voice that matters. And that seems to have gotten lost in Utah politics. And that's something that really bothers me. It bothers me to see votes going to the highest bidder. It bothers me to see somebody, a signature gatherer, show up to my in-laws' house and say that he gets paid $2 per signature for every signature that he gathers, and he's gathering signatures for 6 different candidates. That is the part of the signature gathering process that I absolutely disdain. They know nothing of these candidates. They just go around, and all they're trying to do is get paid to gather signatures to get these on the ballot. There is a lot of dynamics inside of the party. And I want nothing more than to strengthen the Republican Party and make sure that I leave a heritage and a legacy for my children, to make sure that the Republican Party, there is national attention on this race, because they want to see what direction the Utah Republican Party is going to go, because of our senators that are so polarized, because of the way some of our other representatives stand up. They are watching to see what direction Utah goes, and the country is looking at us. And whether that is more conservative or more liberal, we're about to find out. So thank you, everybody, for having me. Thanks for this time. And like I say, sorry I had to jump off early, but I appreciate the opportunity, and you guys have a great night.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Carson.
very much,
Thank you,
Carson.
Carson.
We'll excuse you now, and you have a great night too. Thanks for working with our schedule. So
Thanks,
if,
Larry.
Carson.
if the
Yeah,
other
thanks, guys.
candidates can stick around for a little bit longer, I think we may have a few more questions. I know one of the questions that was pending in the chat has been repeated multiple times. I'm going to let Bob go because he's a board member, and I know he'll have a good question. And then I may go to that question in the chat if we haven't got to it yet.
Okay, I guess Carson might have been the best, but I think Tina knows my proposal. What I want to do is throw this to all the chairs. I had a proposal because I think you're right. I don't think lawsuits are going to repeal SB 54, and maybe there's some leverage with the legislature, but that's proven difficult. And I kind of feel like Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football, right? But I gave a proposal that said, okay, why don't we do what we can as a party? And as a party, our bylaws would allow us to make 2 lanes through convention. 1 lane for, I'll say, signature candidates only, although I call it other, because if the law changes, you can give the lieutenant governor a bag of money and get on the ballot, then it covers everybody, right? So there's the other lane, and there's the traditional caucus convention only lane. So you can come through, like an example would be the governor's race, right? So Greg Hughes never gathered signatures. So Greg Hughes could use that convention lane, I'll call it. The other candidates who gathered signatures, like Governor Cox, they would have to use that signature lane. And we would produce, per our constitutional bylaws, 1 or 2 candidates from each lane. So that means Greg Hughes would have been on the ballot by virtue of just if he was the only guy. Now, Amy Winder Newton, I can tell you, was actually thinking of, she liked this proposal of mine. It came up at an SEC meeting. It got a majority vote, but 2/3 was required. And I actually wasn't pushing it that hard because there was another matter that took up all the oxygen. But this 2-lane convention would allow us as a party to put our candidates, basically it would be kind of, I think, a windbreak for the convention only candidates. However, it would also help the signature candidates, because if you didn't get enough signatures, which happens all the time, you could still fight it out with those candidates in that lane, and you could get on the ballot. We might have more people on the ballot. I won't deny that's a possibility. You might not. But I think RCV would be a solution for that. So I understand this might be a little complicated. Some people don't get it the first time, but I call it the dual path convention. It's actually very much to me like what SB 54 did, where it made 2 paths to the ballot. Well, let's make 2 paths through convention. And we want to encourage people to use the convention only path, because that gives us a traditional convention. And kind of like a candidate Brad Baker bought out, that would give the delegates something to do. They would be able to put somebody on the ballot that wasn't already on the ballot from signatures. So if you get any sense of what I said, please go ahead and comment your thoughts on should the party do something like that.
So quickly, if you want to comment, it would be Scott, Stuart, Brad, and Tina would be my order.
Sure. It's an interesting idea. The only problem that you have with it is that the legislator has the authority to pass legislation that would decrease the thresholds for signature gathering to get on said ballot. They've already attempted this at least once that I know of. So I think that answer or that question would need to be answered. It is an interesting idea. I would not be in total opposition of it, but I do think there are some minute questions that would have to be answered in order for that to become a reality. And then second, you have to ask your question is, as you get through the convention and you have a signature gatherer who is already on the ballot, then your convention candidate who comes out with whatever they come out with, then how do you reconcile that at the primary? And therein lies what I think is one of the largest things that would have to be overcome.
Stuart, Brad, or Tina?
Sure. So I like the concept of trying to get the limit the number of people on the ballot. I think that's probably, I shouldn't say it that way. The most important issue I see right now is getting it down to 2 people. I don't like the plurality. I don't think that's a good system. I don't think that's a good shakeout. In the meantime, like I said earlier, I think the key thing is to improve the caucus system and make it what everyone else wants to deal with. I think when we go back into these legislative or, legislative or judicial fights about what that ballot access should be, I think it divides the party, and I think we've got to avoid that. I really think the difference between Mia Love and Burgess Owens was the lack of infighting in the Utah Republican Party. And we can't risk it. Our neighbors are turning blue. We've got to stay red. I'd like to focus on just keeping and improving the caucus system. Thanks, Larry.
Brad or Tina?
And I was on mute. Honestly, I'd be interested to learn a little bit more about that. I do agree that we need to be coming up with alternatives. I know that I think it was in 2019, the US Supreme Court shot down appeals to try and get SB 54 repealed. So I definitely do agree that legislatively or judicially, my apologies, we don't have a lot of options. I mean, based off how that was explained, that's an interesting idea, and I definitely would be interested in hearing more about that at a later date.
Any
I do
comment,
have it
Tina?
written up as a bylaw proposal in case anybody wants it. I can email it to whoever.
All right. So Bob, I think the one part of it that we talked about that you didn't talk about was that you'd have one of the problems that you've got is when people go through and you're spending, if a person gets signatures and they're done in 2 weeks gathering signatures while you're spending the 6 weeks in the caucus convention process working and focusing on just a group of delegates that's a smaller group, then they're ahead of you in that time frame in hitting the general. And you have to, or the primary, and you have to remember for a candidate, you're trying not to just get through caucus convention, you're trying to win the primary. So there's a strategy difference there. And if you're spending all of your time, money on just a small group, then you need one of 2 things to happen at the end. You need delegates who are willing to be your grassroots organizers and help getting you through the rest of it, or you need delegates who've been willing to say, I will not take anything from a candidate. So there's no meals, there's no t-shirts, there's no all of the good stuff that usually used to happen before I was a candidate, because I'm not giving you guys any of that stuff. But those are what I see. If you're looking at it from all aspects, it's a great way to make it more accessible for the grassroots. But you also have to consider that SB 54 didn't happen because the grassroots asked for it. It happened because the elected officials did it. So in order to offset that, you've got to look at it the way they were looking at it in giving access to a ballot.
All right, thanks, Bob, for that question. Important proposal you have and the responses from the candidates. One of the participants and delegates has been wanting to ask the question but hasn't been able to raise his hand to each of the candidates. And this one should be pretty straightforward, yes or no. I guess if you want to give a brief explanation or not, you can. It's a question of, do you support a censure of Senator Mitt Romney? And I'll preface that with 2 things. Number one, just so everyone knows, our Platform Republicans PAC, our board of directors unanimously signed a censure and was the first organized group in the state of Utah to censure Mitt Romney. So we have taken a stand on that. Number 2, there is a resolution that's been submitted by Delegate Don Guyman one of the people from the grassroots organization, so that the delegates will be able to vote on a censure. So I'll go in the order of Stuart, Brad, Tina, and Scott. Yes or no, censure Senator Romney for his impeachment votes?
No, I don't believe we should censure our elected officials for votes they take. There are ways to deal with that. They're called elections. They come up every 2, 4, or 6 years. Secondly, if we want to start the redivision of the Utah Republican Party, we'll start it with a censure vote. We have to stay united. And finally, we have to look forward, not backward. It'll be May 1st by the time that vote's taken. What we're talking about happened in February. It's time to move forward. It's time to look at 2022, not at 2021. Thank you.
Brad, then Tina, then Scott.
All right, so I am firmly in negation of such a censure. Whether or not you like Mitt Romney, there's a key issue that this would only serve to further divide, like Stuart said. Mitt Romney is definitely a very moderate Republican. And one of the key ways to help heal the divide in the Utah Republican Party is put an emphasis on helping more moderate voices and more conservative voices to be able to come to issues that we agree upon. Unfortunately, being a Republican in the state of Utah has become more about what we're against than what we're for. I'm not saying that you have to love what Mr. Romney did. And personally, I believe impeachment, while having a good intention, has only ever been used for political grandstanding at absolute best. We need to do as Stuart said, and we need to focus on ways to unify the party. And such a vote would not only contradict what the party as a whole did when it released a press release on that in, I think it was February of this year, but also to try and heal the party as a whole, because we need to be for something and not just against something.
Tina?
I stand for the rule of law, and part of our platform and our bylaws allows something like this to go forward. And this is a good way to take the temperature of the grassroots and to allow them to take their vote. So I would support taking the vote. What's always interesting to me in this discussion is we're assuming that the delegates will say yes. And that's interesting to me as I've talked to delegates over the last couple of weeks. I'm not so sure that it will pass, but it is an important part of the process to allow them their voice. And I do have some concerns on how you move forward with what's coming down the pike at us. There are a lot of things that we could be focusing on coming forward that a centrist may be able to help on in stopping some of this spending. But it is an important part of the process to allow the delegates their voice and to allow them to speak to a senator. It's a 6-year term. It's really hard to have that kind of pushback or that kind of message sent to a senator that's in for 6 years without something like this being able to be used.
And Scott?
Absolutely, he needs to be censured. He's in violation of the Constitution of the United States. He has no right to vote to impeach a president who is no longer sitting. That whole thing was a farce. And so I absolutely support the impeachment the censure of Mitt Romney on those grounds. Listen, we're a Republican Party. We've been moving left for decades. And it is about time that we start standing on our principles and fighting for what is right. And if we're not willing to stand up and take some arrows and take some punches from the left that is infiltrated as Republicans in our party, then what do we stand for and what are we teaching our children? It's about time we start standing up for what our platform says and what the Constitution of this United States says. So, sorry, I'm a little passionate about this one. So there you have it.
Thank you each for answering that. I'm going to go to Otto. You've been waiting patiently with your hand up. This will be the last question because of time. And then with the remaining time, we'll have each of the remaining candidates give a closing statement and try to be done by 7:30. Go ahead, Otto.
Okay, thank you, Larry. This question is aimed at Scott, I think only Scott, because it's a question about one of your emails. And I just want to say that I really appreciate you sending out those emails where you not only go into the deep questions, but you've gone into some of the behind the scenes details on what's been going on the last few months. So my question is, you've indicated that a certain individual might be trying to do a smear campaign against you. And my question is, if it is true, what would the motivation be for that person to come after you?
Okay. Boy, okay, the story is long and I will try to keep it as short as possible. So through my tenure, everybody knows that I'm a pretty conservative guy. If you're doing shady things, I'm going to call you out. I don't really care if you have an R or a D or an I behind your name. That's my philosophy. I'm about we the people, and our government works for us, not us for them. So that being said, during the campaign season, I was aggressively going after Congressional District 4. I released a video about a report that was done to cover up some of the things that Ben McAdams was doing. I was threatened by a high-ranking official, which I won't name a name here, this will come out eventually, that if I didn't take down that video, I would be sued by Zions Bank. I don't cotton to threats very well. So I said, okay, well, fine, have him sue me. We'll crack open his books and discovery and we'll have ourselves a good time. So that was the beginning of it. All the complaints that you folks have been hearing in the news are untrue, and I can prove it, and I will prove it. We are aligning ourselves right now for the full truth to come out. So you ask, if you look at the timing, all of this, as each concern about a volunteer I had came forward, they were addressed immediately. And Miss Winder Newton wrote me a text in mid-September, and said that there were concerns about Mr. Robinson. I asked her no less than 4 times for her to forward her concerns via writing so I could investigate it. 127 days later, I get her complaint. I immediately opened up an investigation. We went through that process. In the end, I released all my volunteers. That was all completed by February 19th. So it wasn't until 4 days after I declared my run for state party chair did the Tribune come out, call us to their offices and basically tell us, we don't want any of your evidence. We have our hit piece. We're going to run it. So that was the reason why I released the letter I did, basically letting everybody know that these are the accusations that the Trib made. So I find the timing to be extremely curious. So, and also it has been said by Ms. Newton that I and my volunteer have been attacking 2 of her largest volunteers. So I don't know what the motivation is. I suspect, I have some definite suspicions, but I do question the timing of all of this, when even though those ladies that forwarded one was a directional concern on her campaign, and the other was a critique that was on a video. Those were rectified at the time to the satisfaction of those young ladies, as indicated by emails and texts that I will be presenting to the public in time. So again, I can't say for sure what the motivation is, but the timing is definitely suspicious.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If any of the other candidates, I know that was specific to Scott and his situation. If any of the other candidates want to comment on that, you could do so briefly. And we would go in the order that I've been going in, which would be, next would be Brad, then Tina, then Stuart. I'm seeing shaking heads for no. I'm going to come back to Tina. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Tina, but some people in the chat, I don't know if you've looked at the chat, maybe either they didn't understand or they were unclear on your answer about the Romney censure. I'm going to try to keep it neutral. I think people know where I stand, but people weren't clear if you personally would vote or would support a Romney censure. A yes or no was what people were asking in the chat.
One of the struggles that you have in a representative seat, especially as the chair, is to not sway a vote. And having experienced the day I have, I feel very strongly that it is the responsibility of the chair not to sway the vote. So if you are asking me what I will do as chair, that is a different question than what I would do individually. I watched the proceedings very, very closely both times. I did not see what Mitt Romney saw. I followed the rule of law. I think Brad made a good point that typically impeachment is used as a political tool. And so I would not have voted the way he did. My vote I am a state delegate. I will be voting on this issue. And I was not in support of what he did. I wasn't in support of impeachment. I just didn't see the evidence and I didn't hear him explain what he saw that I did not see. Does that cover it for everyone or?
Thank you for the follow-up. I'm going to have each of you do a closing of, I think we can do maybe 2 minutes to get us done here by 7:30. I'm going to take the liberty of for 30 seconds, again, thanking everyone. I wish we would have had bigger capacity because we definitely had more than 100 people who wanted to join us, but we'll try to put the video up and we also had this going live on our Facebook page. So we've tried to cover as many people as possible. If you like what you've heard from the Platform Republicans PAC and you like what we're doing, please go to our website and check out more about what we do and what we've done. It's Platform Republican with no S on it, .com. That's platformrepublican.com. You can donate there. We definitely take donations, and our donations will be used next year to support candidates who are firm for our Republican Party platform. So thank you again, and we appreciate the candidates participating. And just based on what I'm looking at here, for some reason it cycled back to going with Brad first and going in alphabetical order. So I'm just going to go with my cycle here. Brad, Tina, Scott, and Stuart. 2 minutes, wrap us up. Thank you.
All right. So first of all, just again to echo the thank you to everyone for being here. This has been an extremely healthy and political discourse, and that is something that we need in the party today. Now I'm going to do something that probably is going to stick out compared to the other candidates, and I'm not going to tell you to vote for me, delegates, because I'm hoping that my performance today and my answers today will have persuaded you. Instead, delegates, I'll tell you what I perceive the party needs in a leader, and whoever best fits that is who you should vote for. The first thing a party leader needs is to be someone who will unify the party. Whether or not you agree with more moderate Republicans like Senator Romney or more conservative Republicans, we all believe the same principles. We just might have a different way of going about it than other people. And that's the beauty of political discourse as it stands. That's the beauty of political discourse, to be able to get into a room and work on the art of compromise, something that at all levels of politics seems to be lost. The next thing that needs to be done, delegates, is whoever is the chair needs to be someone who has creative fundraising solutions. And this is because fundraising is one of the most important things that we need to be doing in politics, and there's definitely ways to be improving it. And finally, delegates, the person who deserves your vote for chair should be the one who puts the most effort and has the best plans to update and modernize the caucus and convention system. We're all here because of the fact that the caucus and convention system works. And although we may have disagreements as far as the shape that the caucus and convention system is currently in, the fact is, like I said in my opening speech, we are at a great crossroads, delegates. And we have the ability to make so many different changes and positive advocacies for not only the party, but the state as a whole. So whoever best can do those things, delegates, deserves your vote.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to be here tonight and to have us all in this forum. I was disappointed that the state party didn't follow through with its plan to have a debate this week. So this was a great opportunity, and I appreciated the opportunity to be here. So when I was looking at my spring coming off my elected position at the end of December, And I thought I had some extra time. I took a medieval history class, and I was in the middle of writing Taxation Brings Representation as my paper on medieval England when my phone blew up one day with people asking me if I would consider running for this position. It was not a decision that I made easily, because I know how much time and effort it takes and how much time and effort I personally give into these types of situations. This is where, when I look back over my last 20 years, where I have consistently served and where I've consistently given. I'm not going to earn every vote here today, because I run on a platform of unity. And I know what that means because I've talked to a lot of delegates. And I don't pander. I tell you what I think, and then I act as the representative that I am. And those things can sometimes be in conflict, because I have to represent my group and not my own opinion. If you want, and typically if you ask me, I'll give you both. The one thing I asked when I put my name in is that there were no hands on the scale and that I had a fair process. And I feel like that is important for any candidate. And one thing I will absolutely promise, that if I am elected to this position, that it is a fair and open election process across the state of Utah, because we cannot stand for fair and honest elections at a local level, at a state level, or even at a national level, if we are not willing to stand for an open, fair process in our own party. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Scott, you're next.
I think in the leader that you elect on Saturday needs to be someone with a plan to improve the party. I will come with the plan that I created for Salt Lake County with small business principles. I will come with the E-Club that was designed so that the grassroots can be the main contributor to the party and not the big donors, because I believe we need to be independent as a party. Of course, we will welcome those donations, but we have to have our independence. We also have to have somebody with a vision of where we're going to take our party. People talk about unity, and I think you have to unify around a particular cause. And the cause is to elect, I don't like the word good Republicans, but conservative Republicans who are going to represent the people that they're elected by. And we as a party need to hold them accountable to that promise. And I believe that is truly the power of the party, is by implementing small business principles and electing those that are responsible to the people and holding their feet to the fire when they do something that is misaligned with the principles that we espouse. Then we truly become a party of the people, and we become a unified party. But short of that, if we don't do that, if we do not stand on our principles as they are written in the platform or by what is directed by the state central committee meetings, it's those folks that run our party, and it is simply up for the chair to bring ideas, bring new processes and new methods to accommodate a healthy, robust party that elects its people and holds them accountable. So with that, that's what I got.
Thank you, Scott. Stewart.
Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate the job you've done tonight. I know it's difficult. I'll start with the role of the party chair. The role of the party chair is to build the party. It's to bring the coalitions together to win elections. For the past 2 years, I've done exactly that in Utah County. I've worked with the grassroots, with the people that with the people that are considered on the far right, with the people that are considered moderate. In executive committee meetings, I've listened to the opinions of all. I've asked for those who didn't want to give them. I've taken those opinions. I've helped our group build consensus. Our last few meetings, where we've dealt with how to handle a special election, with how to handle a convention or 2 conventions in a pandemic, we've been able to get a consensus. That's what a leader does. He builds, or she builds, consensus. She takes different opinions, and puts them together and gets the right outcome. We face a monumental challenge in the near future. People across this country believe that Utah is going to swing to the left. First of all, I don't see that. Second of all, I'm not going to let it happen. That's why I'm here tonight, and that's why I believe all of you are here. Building consensus and building teams is what I've done my whole life. We'll raise money, not just from the grassroots, not just from the large donors. It will be from everywhere. We won't just get volunteers from one group or another. We'll get them from all across the spectrum. If our party wants to win elections, we have to be a big tent. We have to have leaders who will answer the questions directly, who will leave no question about where they stand, but who will listen to all involved to build consensus and to win elections. And that's why I'm running for chair, and that's why I hope that you vote for me. Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate the time you've spent and your entire PAC.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.